Hello, my name is Decimus Claudius, and I am very pleased to be able to stream with you today. I have as a guest Gaius Sempronius Scepsis Agricola, proquaestor of Australia, and also prefectus of the Cohortus Second Legion, or the Second Tenth Legion Fretensius. Uh, Welcome so much, and I have to say thank you for streaming with me at such a late hour for you.
Not a problem. No, my pleasure. It's when we're a global community, it's making these moments and times available is important. So, my pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm wondering how, on the other side of the world in Australia, did you first hear about Nova Roma?
It was in 2019. Um, the governor, well, no, he wasn't governor at that time. Decimus Aurelius Ignarius was coming to Melbourne from overseas, and he was into Nova Roma, and he contacted me. Um, I was the treasurer of the Ancient Roman Reenactors of Victoria, who our representation is the 10th Legion, 10th Fretensis. We're a reenactment group here in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. And he contacted us to see whether we could enter into some sort of relationship. And from that day, he introduced me to, and then slowly fully immersed and engaged.
Great. So, um, how did you first get interested though in ancient Roman history? Then was it long before then, or was it also sort of at the same time?
No, it was a little bit earlier than that. So, for many years, I was interested in ancient or medieval Japanese history. But about in 2005, 2006, I became interested in ancient Rome. Playing Rome Total War is where it really started. And then started reading different different elements on ancient Rome and the Roman Republic. So the period that I was very interested in at that time was the Punic Wars, specifically the struggle and the battles between Scipio Africanus and Hannibal Barca. So the Second Punic War. And I started getting into painting miniatures. So painting little miniatures, and my wife turned around and said to me, why you sit in an office all day and now you sit here at the table all day on the weekends painting miniatures. Why don't you get yourself a real hobby? So I
Oh
started
no.
looking for yes. So I started looking for reenactment groups. There weren't many at the time. There wasn't one in Melbourne at the time here where I live. So I was going to travel up to Sydney. When I say travel up to Sydney, that's 1,000 kilometres away. Or even across to New Zealand. Eventually, I formed in 2016, and I joined them in January 2017. And yeah, got pretty immersed into ancient Rome, and we represent our representation is the 10th Fretensis between 0 AD and 100 AD. So not necessarily Julius Caesar's famed 10th Legion, although it's still very it's disputed as to whether it morphed into the 10th Fretensis and whether the 10th equestrian, the 10th Fretensis, and Julius Caesar's 10th were all the same thing or not. But no, we're a little bit later, and the 10th Fretensis saw a lot of action in in Judea during the Jewish revolt of battles. But yeah, so that was my transition into Roman history. So from playing Rome Total War to miniatures into reenacting, and now with Nova Roma in 2019, the next phase of it, which is a lot more, uh, I don't want to say serious, because with our reenactment, we're quite serious. Um, with our reenacting, we put a lot of emphasis on historical accuracy, which has enabled us to do a lot of work with universities. So we've got an affiliation with the university and their arts department, and specifically archaeology and ancient studies. Um, we also did the National Museum of Australia, which is in Canberra. They had an exhibition from the British Museum, Rome, City and Empire, and they had us go out and put on a living history display for 4 days. So we went up there and we took engineering equipment up as well, and so that was pretty good. So we we're pretty the 10th Fretensis and the second cohort Nova Roma is part of the 10th Fretensis, and I'm the Profectus Cohortus of the second cohort, but I'm the Aquilifer of 10th Fretensis, and so we take that quite serious. But Nova Roma, with the Chorus Honorum and the religious aspects, takes it to another level as well, which has been fascinating.
So how big is this legion today, and what sort of events do you participate in?
So we have about 28 members of our ancient Roman reenactors um, group, because we not only do military reenactment, but we also have one member who specialises in ancient Roman makeup and hairstyles, for example. We have another member who is interested in civilians, who is interested in the clothing and women's clothing of the day. We have another a lecturer from Melbourne University, and he's into archaeological experimental archaeology, where things that we read about and they see in reliefs. He likes to see if we can take what's the theory behind how people assume it was used. So within the Legion itself, we have about 14 active members. We come together once a month, but there's a festival items on display. So we have a scorpion, a cherry, A-frame crane that we have, an onager as well. So we attend that festival, and we do some marching and diversity. We're out of lockdowns, and we're able to the universities are going again. To be extras in they did an episode on Constantine. They asked us to go along, so we went on extras for that and did some of Australia, where we went and put on a living history display.
Awesome. So what type of gear do you have personally? And how did you start from, the because I guess you have loaner gear and then you sort of work your way up building your own collection.
Um, so as the Aquilopher, I have my headdress, the wolf, here in the back corner behind me. Above my head is the Aquila, so the standard of the Legion, and over my other shoulder is the Parma shield, which is also the shield that I carry. So, how did I start putting it together? Slowly. Um, that's the wolf that I've got there is the third iteration of the wolf. The first two I had, which I purchased, were good, but not as good as this one. As far as being realistic, this is not a real wolf. This is a man-made wolf out of Spain. The Parma shield as well. Originally, my Parma shield was one that came from um, Depica, Indian made. This one is handmade in Poland from Fabrica Cacti. So over time, I've just improved the quality of what I had. The Vexillum here of the second cohort, Nova Roma, that was handmade in Italy, hand painted by Valeria, a lady in Italy who makes that sort of stuff. So again, my original Gladius was purchased. It's just um, an item that you just go online and from Armia. We tend to buy our items from Armia for our group. We find them to be very good quality out of France. And shipping to Australia is always costly, unfortunately. So the shipping costs can be up to half the price of an item that we buy. But eventually, with the Gladius, I ended up having one custom made. So this one here is one that I had made in the US.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's got the 10th Fretensis there, the bull, and the Legio
Beautiful.
X. So I had that made. Sorry?
Is it sharp?
It's not sharp, but it is pointy. So it is, yeah, no. We're not allowed to have sharp weapons in public here. So even with our
But you could still
insurance,
slice watermelon or so with that, right?
I can stab it. I can still cause some serious damage with the. It's a stabbing weapon, the Gladius. So that point would do some damage. Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Nice.
And then I
And what
had,
about your? Oh, sorry.
and then I also had the matching Pugio made. So it's got the same embossing on the scabbard. So I had that made. Um, so then there is the Valera. So that's the chest harness. So the
Very
harness I made
nice.
myself. So the harness, the leather work I made myself. The medals come from all parts of the world. So some from Germany, some from India, some from Italy. So there's a Medusa there. There's a sun god, a lion, and another Medusa. Um, so I purchased those and then made the harness. Bought the leather and made the harness myself. So that's another thing that I've got into is leather work, which I enjoy. Not very good at it, but I do enjoy the leather work and making different bits and pieces. So my other equipment is a tunic, which I've handmade. So I bought the material and then hand stitched it all. So I've got that. I wear a Lorica Hamata, and that was purchased, and yeah, the helmet. I also wear, which will be a little bit controversial, a leather subramalis. So that I find it comfortable. I don't see why a Roman wouldn't wear it. As an officer, I'm allowed to wear a subramalis with protrugus, so I do. I also have a padded one material, but I find the leather one to be more comfortable, which hopefully doesn't cause too much controversy, because there's some questions around whether, in fact, they had leather subramalises. But that
Did you make your own?
that's
Sorry. Did you make your own boots and sandals?
no, I'm not that good. I have purchased leather to make leather caligae, so to make some caligae, and I have purchased hobnails. Um, but I haven't made any myself yet. I have had 2 custom made. There is a gentleman in New Zealand that makes caligae, and he made me 2 pairs, because I'm off to Hadrian's Wall next year, to walk Hadrian's Wall, and things going well, I plan to do it in a soft kit, so a tunic and a belt, pugio, furca, so I'll carry a furca, and in caligae, so I'll see how that goes, and whether I can do the whole distance in with caligae, or whether I'll have to go to modern clothing and shoes.
Will you be doing that walk just as a tourist, or will you also be participating in some events while you're there?
No, just as a tourist. So I've booked my last week. In fact, I finished booking the actual tour with Contours, the people who do it. They'll leapfrog my luggage from hotel to hotel while I walk the distance. I've got my brother, who is Marcus Sempronius Scepsis. He's doing the walk with me, but he'll be in modern gear while I'm in a Roman soft kit. So we'll see how we go. It'll be interesting. I've got to start training for it one of these days.
So I've actually been to many places on the wall, but with buses and cabs. So I didn't, walk along a long stretch of the wall, just, as a, maybe a few hundred meters here or there, depending on the site. But there's so many wonderful places and museums. But I believe you've already been there, because I've taken a look at your map, and you've been to Vindolanda, right?
No, I haven't been to Vindolanda. I've been to Bath.
Oh.
Vindolanda and Hadrian's Wall is where I want to go to. So the map I shared with you has all the places I want to visit, and where the photos are the places I've actually been. So it's so Vindolanda we're going to stop at and go into the museum while we walk along, and we'll go to. I've been to Bath before, but I'm taking my brother to Bath. Then we'll go to Eboracum or York, modern, and so we'll have a few days there, and then we'll also go to Ardagh Roman Fort, which is up into Scotland, and also I hope to visit also the Antonine Wall, so in Scotland as well. So that's all part of this trip. And I was fortunate enough that I'll get to Rome for 2.5 days. Originally, Rome wasn't part of this trip. It was all going to be based in England. But after travelling all of this way, from Australia all the way to the UK and to Europe, we have decided to skip down to Italy and spend 2.5 days in Rome, which I'm really looking forward to.
Amazing. So on your England portion, are you going to have time to visit Newcastle upon Tyne? It's like Wallsend is next to there, but also has a very wonderful museum there, which yeah, really encompasses a lot of the finds found all around the area.
Yeah, so the tour actually finish. The tour typically finishes in Newcastle on the Tyne, um, but if you go from west to east, you're walking into the wind. So we've flipped it, and we're going from east to west, which means we'll start in Newcastle on the Tyne and end up in on the other side at Wallsend. But yes, we will be at Newcastle on the Tyne. Looking forward to going there.
Great,
There's a big
definitely
statue
an
of the
awesome place.
Centurion, I believe.
And so you have 2.5 days in Rome. Rome is obviously a wonderful place to visit. There's so many places um, that you could see. Some of them, classic places which you might have been to already, and then some repeats. So what can you fit reasonably inside these 2.5 days?
Well, I've only actually got 1.5 days left because one day we're going out to Tuscany and doing some wine tasting. So that's a day tour. So we'll have a day left. I've been to Ostia already. I've been to the catacombs, been and seen the aqueducts, um, been to the Forum, been through the Colosseum. Um, so for me, to be honest, I just love to go and sit in the Forum. There's something about in the Forum and through the temples there, and just wandering through and reflecting on what transpired on that marble, what those columns have seen, what that um, who that hypercaust warmed up. That just for me is as good as I just thoroughly enjoy that. So I'll probably the last time I was there was in 2016. So I think I'll just go there and sit there and soak it all in again to last me another 7 years, 8 years.
Awesome. One interesting thing about the Forum and that area is that uh, sometimes they open up new places. I was there back, uh, I believe it was in October. And even though I've been to Rome 12 times, it was the first time I could walk through Caesar's Forum, which they just added as part of the itinerary. And also, if you get a super pass, you could go and see the houses of Augustus and Livia on the Palatine, and you could see a few other interesting, buildings and rooms. Throughout that area. And I believe also about 4 or 5 years ago, I went into the Colosseum's basement for the first time. So that also opened up uh, to easy access for tourists. I'm not sure if that's part of the super pass or not. I mean, it's a couple more euros, but you definitely get to see more sites. And are you going to check out any of the museums like the Capitoline or the Vatican?
Yeah, I've been to the Vatican, so I might not go there again. But I've since we did our ancient Roman walk, the tour that Julia Agrippa Aquila took us through, I might touch base with her and see if she can actually take us on a personal tour of some areas of Rome. So I'll see. I'd like to go to. There's a place relating to Scipio Africanus that last time I went was closed. I'd really like to go and have a look through there
The Tomb
if
of
I
the
can.
Scipios?
Yeah. So I'll need to track that down again and see if I can go there. But I've walked the Circus Maximus, so I've done that. But I'll look. There's so much to see in Rome. I'm sure there'll be lots for me to see and enjoy.
I just want to get to a few of the comments. Obviously, this is a live stream, so uh, we welcome comments by the viewers. For instance, Lentulus wrote that he announced your trip to Britain in the Provincia Britannia community group, and it seems there will be a few local Nova Romans willing to accompany you.
Oh,
So that
fantastic.
would be interesting to meet up with them. And also, Inguinarius wrote, the background almost looks like the Italian flag backwards if you squint enough. I believe he's referring to the red flags, the white wall, and the blinds that sort of resemble a green, but I'm not exactly sure.
Must be a reflection because those blinds are grey. Okay, there you go. No, well, there's nothing to celebrate the Italian flag at the moment. They didn't even get into the World Cup. Let's not.
Yeah.
Don't remind me of
I
those
don't want to.
two.
I don't want to get into too much of soccer. My mom's from Argentina, so I was rooting for Argentina
Okay.
yesterday. I mean, Australia put up a good fight yesterday, but I mean, Argentina was the heavy favorites. Were you able to watch though? Because there was quite a time difference. I believe it started at what, like 6 in the morning your time, the game yesterday.
Yeah, so it starts at, I think they start normally around 4 o'clock in the morning. And So, yeah, you have to get up nice and early if you want to catch the games. And they've performed very well. I think it's only the second time in our history that the Socceroos have got into the final 16. So we've done well. And we cheated out last time by Italy, in fact, because of a dive. So there you go. I don't think there was any dives this time round, though.
Nice. Um, Speaking about sports, have you seen pictures of this ancient sport? I believe that they do it in Tuscany now, where they really fight each other. I believe it starts with a H, but I forgot the name of that.
It's almost like full-on wrestling fighting. And it's yes, and you've got to pin someone to the ground. From what I have seen it, I don't know too much about it, but I have seen it,
For
and it
me, the
scares the hell out
closest,
of
yeah, it's kind of like a mix between rugby and mixed martial arts.
me. Yes, I don't know what the rules are because it looks as if there are none. I
Yeah,
don't think you can have weapons. I haven't seen anybody in there with weapons, but anything to do with hands and feet, I think is um, is 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 allowed from what I've seen.
awesome. Um, Getting back a little bit to the your travels. So you've been to quite a number of places across the Roman Empire. So outside of Rome, what are some of like the more favorite or memorable places that you've been to over the years?
Um, yeah, so the reality is that from down here we don't get to Europe that often, but I've been able to get there a couple of times, and typically my family go in one direction, and so when we went to Europe in 2015, my wife and daughters went off to Harry Potter Studios or something in England, and I did a day tour out to Bath. So I visited Bath. I've been to um, the Roman lighthouse that's down on the White Cliffs of Dover. So I've been down there and had a look at those. The things that I really enjoyed, I was in Switzerland for 3 weeks, and I had a day off, and I went to Elysia, which is where Julius Caesar had his famous standoff with the Gauls and Vercingetorix. So that was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed that trip.
I've actually never
Um,
been to Elysia. Um, what what can you actually do and see there? Because I believe It's just a grassy field plus a museum with some reconstructions, correct? You don't actually see any ruins in that sort of a sense.
Correct. So there's no ruins there. So there's a reconstructed, because there's still some debate over where it actually was. But there's a museum, there's a statue of Vercingetorix, and there's a reconstructed the Roman palisades, and the defensive structures that the Romans had going up to the wall, which they used to slow down the Gauls as they went in. There's a very nice museum there as well. But there's no ruins for that trip. The ruins I saw were in Luzerne, there's Roman bits and pieces that were there. I really enjoyed. I went to Philippi, the battlefield where Mark Antony and Octavian fought it out after the third civil war, I guess it might have been. So
That's in northern Greece, right?
Yeah. So that was interesting, and there was also a museum there, and there's also ruins there. So there's all sorts of ruins there. But the most interesting, one of the most exciting places I've been was the site of the Battle of Pharsalus, which is where Julius Caesar faced off against Pompey in 48 BC. So, and that I was driving through cornfields in Greece. There's absolutely nothing there. So I was using my phone to do some tracking, and I was driving through farmland. I was driving into people's private properties, and taking a drop pin, and then racing off to the next quarter, and stood where I felt Pompey's camp would have been, and where Pompey would have been looking down into the battlefield of Pharsalus. And I was on the other side where Caesar would have been looking up, because at that battle Pompey had the high ground, and that was that was quite. I quite enjoyed it. The fact that there was nothing there, and when I was hiring a car to do it because there's no tours there, and I tried to get a private tour, and the lady said, the tour guide said, "I'll take you to Philippi because there's a museum there, and I can explain what's there, because I think they're archaeologists or historians of some sort." But when I spoke to her about Pharsalus, she said, "There's nothing there for me to point out and talk to you about. You're better off just going on your own," which is what I did. So, but yeah, it was just fascinating, finding the river, Euphrates. So finding the river on the left-hand side, which is what Caesar had on his left flank, and then making my way from there and mapping out the battlefield.
Were there some archaeological museums either there or at Philippi that actually has items from the battles itself?
Philippi did, but Pharsalus, there's absolutely nothing there. Nothing. I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find anything at all. Philippi did. Philippi had a museum, and all sorts of bits and pieces in it.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned earlier about the that you're interested in the Punic Wars, which is a very fascinating time for me to read about as well. And there's a few places that really come to mind. Maybe for future consideration. One of them is in Sicily, off the coast. There's an island called Favignana, and there they have these the rostra, so beaks of ships, and they have, I believe, at least 12 Roman ones and one Carthaginian one. And these are original, pulled up from the sea, from like the sea battles. Absolutely amazing. And like I said, there's about like 12 of them in total. Now, uh, there occasionally I've seen like one of them in a special exhibition, but most of them really don't leave Italy, and you can find one in the British Museum or in the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art. So that's really amazing. And also Cartagena in Spain,
Oh
so
yeah.
New Carthage. Very interesting, especially because you could even see like the old walls, the old fortification, and there you have a really interesting feeling. Obviously, um, it's good to do a bit of research in advance, for more appreciation. Uh, so I read up on Livy before I went there. So when you went, for instance, uh, to these battlefields where Caesar was, did you read Caesar's autobiography, at least on the wars there, before you went there to have a more of a appreciation of what you're about to see?
Um, Not before. I did after. I did do research and got different books that gave me references. I'm trying to think of the author that I was reading. Um, I'm just trying. Yeah, I can't remember the author's name that I was reading because that's where I got my reference points for the Battle of Fassala, for example, because he'd been there. There's a series called Marius's Mules by Stephen Turnbull, and he maps out Julius Caesar's um, Gaelic campaigns and then goes into the civil wars. It's fictitious, but it's based on history, and he actually visits the sites, and so I got some of the reference points from him. Um, but yeah, I have subsequently read the Caesar's the lower um, versions of Caesar's Gaelic Wars and Civil Wars.
Uh, by the way, I just want to mention in the comments that Lentus wrote that Tiberius Julius Nerva asked him to send his greetings to you
Thank you.
from the Czech Republic. That's where he's based.
Thank you
um,
very much. Now, sorry, before we move on, did you say Fabiana is where the rostrum are?
Favignana,
Fabiana.
Favag. So the Italians have, uh, yeah, with I believe it's a GN, and that therefore it's pronounced a little differently. But I could get it to you later. Basically, it's the ferry from Trapani, and Trapani has an airport, and I think the ferry is about an hour and a half. And like I said, absolutely wonderful. I even took some videos, so maybe I'll make a YouTube video about it because it's actually not a well-known place for having such amazing one-of-a-kind items. So I'll
Wow.
definitely shoot that over to you.
I have to.
Yeah, actually,
I'll have to go. My heritage is Sicilian, so my father and mother are Sicilian.
oh wow. Um, well, if you look more time, there's actually um, more things about the Carthaginians or the Punics to see. One of them is in Marsala. There, it's right to Lilybaeum, and you have Roman, but also Punic items and native statues, and you have a Punic warship or part of it.
Oh wow. Okay.
And another one also close to Marsala, I believe just a little bit south, is the island of Motia, and there was an important Punic city, just a day's sailing from Carthage, and very important city in a lagoon now surrounded by salt flats. and there they have also amazing places. So yeah, definitely Western Sicily if you're interested in Carthaginian or Punic history is the place to go. Have you made it to Sicily yet though?
once. So I have been to, yeah, 2015 I went to Sicily. First time I'd ever been there. But because I have relatives there, cousins, we were there for about 4 days, and the whole 4 days were taken up by families and lunches and dinners and reunions and the like. So I didn't get a chance to do much historical sightseeing, because there's also some well-preserved Greek temples in
Definitely.
yeah, and I didn't get there either. So that's on my bucket list for the next time I get there.
So how often can you reasonably fly over to Europe? Is it once a year, every couple of years?
Um, every with COVID, it was very difficult. We couldn't go anywhere for almost 2 years, and I was in Europe in 2019, and I'm going back next year. And the reality is that out of Melbourne or out of Australia at the moment, it's quite expensive because there's only one or two airlines that are flying out at the moment, so the costs are pretty high. But yeah, my brother and I have decided we're going to do it, and we're off and doing it. But look, for me, probably every 2-3 years, we'd probably do an overseas trip, whether that's to the US or and that's a family holiday. I get to Japan more regularly than that. I work for Mazda Australia, so Mazda's based in Japan, so I get to Hiroshima almost every year, twice a year. But that's only part of the trip, part of the way. So Europe is really only for holidays, and yeah, it's. I mean, We're flying back. We're doing a direct flight back from London to Melbourne, and I think it's about 18 hours straight on the plane, no stopover. So it's a long, and then you're wrecked for a couple of days when you get back here with jet lag.
I remember reading about it a few years ago because I believe it's the largest, or sorry, the longest commercial flight that has like, that has a regular flight because obviously, one-offs don't really count.
Yeah,
But and I remember reading it because the very first one they had a bunch of journalists and
correct.
they described their experiences because it's not just like a mental, but it's also like a physical issue because you can't really move around, and for 18 hours, it's just I don't know if I could do it. I would, but on the other hand, I mean, I also know people that like stop over in Qatar or maybe in Thailand for a day or two, or like, and just to like rest, recuperate, and see something. But I mean, on the other hand, it takes away time from your destination.
Correct. So the on the way there, we stop over in Singapore. Typically, when we fly Melbourne to Europe, London, we stop at Dubai. Um, but again, for, you're on a destination to somewhere. So you want to get. For me, I want to get. I don't want to be spending 2 days in Dubai. I want to get to. I'd rather spend 2 extra days in visiting Rome or visiting something that I'm interested in.
And you mentioned that you've been in the U.S. before. Some people aren't quite aware of it, but there's actually lots of museums in the U.S. with Roman items between, New York and California and many states in between. Have you been able to see a few of them just on your vacations there?
No, our vacations to to the US are typically planned by my wife, and they are all about just relaxing and shopping and and sitting by a pool or sitting by the beach in whether it be in Hawaii or shopping in New York. We have been to New York a number of times, but no, we've never been to a museum in New York. For me, yeah, look, I probably should, but it doesn't feel right.
Well, especially in the U.S., if you need tips about visiting a museum here or there, I'll definitely help you or anybody else, any of the other viewers, because I think I've been to in the U.S. about 20 different museums or
Wow.
thereabouts, clustered mainly on the East Coast, um, Texas, and the West Coast. But I mean, even in smaller towns like in Cleveland or I believe in uh, Portland, Oregon. Okay, not very small towns, but towns that you might not think of. They even have very nice Roman collections.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
definitely. I actually was in Baltimore earlier this year, and I've been to two museums there with Roman items. And a few weeks before I flew over, um, I saw a picture on Twitter for John Hopkins Archaeological Museum, which I never heard of, even though I'm from Maryland. So in April, I visited a third museum with Roman items in Baltimore. So many of them are not well published, but have wonderful collections. But I believe in Australia, there are actually, because you mentioned earlier a special exhibition, but I believe there's a few small Roman collections, permanent collections in Australia. Have you seen them or heard about them?
No, no, I haven't. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't researched them either. So I'll have to be honest, for me, um, I don't actually like going to museums.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I prefer to be wandering around, like we went to what year was that? I can't remember. Might have been 2019. We went to Greece when I went to Phasalis, and again, my wife went to Mykonos and I went to Crete, and I went to Gortnia in Crete, which was it just ruins. And so I'm walking through olive fields, and that's actually what I prefer to be. I like to do, is just go and just walk through ruins and stuff like that, than necessarily going to a. Even when they had the exhibition here from the British Museum, I didn't actually go inside to go watch it.
Oh
To go
no,
and
that was a wonderful opportunity for you.
it just it doesn't capture me. Museums, they just don't. Um,
Even if they have, for instance, some military focus, or for instance in Vindolanda, I mean, that's mostly military related. So I mean, would that would entice you though, right?
yeah, and the one that was at Elysia was interesting because that had some um, that had military bits and pieces there as well. So that intrigued me a little bit, but walking around and trying to find ruins and trying to find where you know foundation stones and stuff like that is, for me, um, is much more fascinating. And it was, even when I was because I do have a bit of a compulsive behavioural issue, and when I was into my Japanese phase, again, I'd be going to. You could go to. You could go to museums and the like, but I'd go and find out in the bush, up in some, on some mountain hilltop, looking at stones in the ground, which were the foundation stones of some, medieval samurai noble's castle, rather than sitting in a museum and looking at the armor and stuff. So I've been to a museum, I've seen the armor, then I'm out of there and I want to go and have a look at, the topography of where something was and all that sort of stuff. That's really the stuff that grabs me. And like I said, the most fun I had was driving around cornfields in Greece, mapping out the battlefield for Pharsala, than spending time in a museum in Philippi. So it's just what really resonates with me and I enjoy the most.
Nice. I mean, I do have plenty of experiences being in museums and playing in ruins. And they're really different because one of them, for instance, in the museum, you have these artifacts, and some of them are perfectly preserved, and you could really enjoy it. Whereas in ruins, some of them, like in Pompeii, you could really get sucked in. Um, with so many mosaics and buildings to see. But I've been on the other end of the stick, whereas you don't see anything. You just have to imagine, this battle here, or this settlement here, or you see a few stones, and that's the city wall, and you're done. So I don't know,
I,
but it's
I love
personal
seeing I love
preference.
seeing your posts of the places that you've been to and the photos you've taken
Okay.
in the museums, and I'm liking your stuff all the time. I think it's fascinating, and I enjoy consuming it that way, rather than going and looking at it behind a piece of glass in a museum. I actually prefer looking at your photos, for example, of the
Thank you.
various numerous, not various, the numerous museums and items that you've explored and photographed. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also have to acknowledge that not everybody is fortunate as you or I to travel as much as we do, and I'm very knowledgeable of that aspect. And one of the things that I think is important for me is to share where I'm going. To share these pictures. Sometimes it inspires people to go to this museum or this ruin, and that really makes me happy. I mean, it's not about like showing off or anything like that.
No,
But
I've written down Fabignana already, so no, it's not. So
great.
thank you for sharing, most definitely.
Definitely. Now, I know it's getting a little late, so I have a few questions before we have to wrap up, unfortunately. One of them has to do with your research. I know that you do some research, so I'm wondering, like, what are some of the books that you really enjoy reading, especially some of the more modern books to to get more information. For instance, when you're reenacting or traveling.
Um, I think that depends on what I'm looking for and where I'm looking to go. As to then I hone in on specifically what I'm looking for and what I enjoy doing. I mean, I'm trying to teach myself Latin at the moment so that I can read um, Cicero or Julius Caesar's commentaries in Latin the way he wrote it. I think that'll be fantastic if I can get to that point. So yeah, look, I guess I mean I had a friend of mine just recently ask me, a work colleague actually, who's interested in Roman Britain, and therefore she was asking me, well, what sort of book would you recommend? So in researching for her, I ended up buying a Kindle book, Roman Conquests of that series, and again, I had a look at it, opened up the pages, and there was quotes there from Caesar's commentaries about when he landed in England and his assessment of Britannia. So it just depends, that's a book I've got on Scipio Africanus by Richard A. Gabriel. So when I was when I'm looking at him, looking at the political aspect as well as his military aspects. So I'll go and specifically look for different bits and pieces. So as I said, he's one of mine. Julius Caesar, Caesar's legions. Mark, Agrippa, the right-hand man of Augustus. He intrigues me more than Augustus himself does, even though Augustus was pretty cool from my point of view. Although any Republicans probably wouldn't think so. But again, different conversation for another day. But so I think I just go in and start researching, probably online firstly, and then from there start honing in and checking different works where I'm a little bit more the history. That, and if that seems to resonate with me, then I'll take it for granted that they've done their research on the next bit that I'm looking or I'm interested in.
I actually just remembered that I forgot to ask you about your name because uh, your name is quite a bit long. It's so Gaius Sempronius Scepsis Agricola, and well, especially Agricola rings a bell because of Tacitus. But I'm wondering how you came up with that name.
So Gaius after Julius Caesar is where I picked that one. Sempronius, because it's as close to my name as possible. Scepsis is, Lentulus was able to find Scepsis as a suitable inclusion for me. And Agricola, I grew up on a farm, so that goes back to my childhood and up until I was, a young adult. I came from a farm, so that's why Agricola's there. So yes, it is a long. Normally there are only three, but I was fortunate enough and permitted to go with four. And mind you that before I joined Nova Roma, I had also played around with Roman names as part of Legio Expratensis. And so there was a little bit of bringing some of that into my Nova Roman name.
Awesome. So one thing I do notice is your T-shirt, and there is that a bull under the Lage 10?
Yep. So that's the bull of so Legio X, the 10th Legion. The Julius Caesar's 10th Legion was raised in Spain, and the Spanish legions typically had the bull represented on them. The Fretensis, comes from potentially a battle that the 10th Fretensis was involved in the Straits of Messina. So there's a theory that that's where they picked up Fretensis, and there's also a dolphin and a ship. Don't know the type of ship that it is. That also appears on some of their tiles and stuff that they do. So there's been archaeological finds with the 10th Fretensis on tiles, and it has a ball and a ship. But our nod is to Julius Caesar's 10th Fretensis, and it could be that it was raised in the month of August by Octavius. That's another theory, and therefore it has the bull for Taurus. But that's and we actually there's a coin in the British Museum which has the 10th Fretensis and a bull, and our bull is stylized off that coin.
Wonderful. Now, I do have. I just noticed one of the comments. because it is a live stream. Somebody wrote, what brought about your interest in ancient Rome? We actually spoke about that at the beginning of this live stream. So once it's over, anybody could just go back and watch it from the beginning in case they're just tuning in now or they didn't watch it from then. I do have to say that if you want to get in a question, please write in the comments right now, or else we might have to wrap up in just a couple of minutes. So yeah, just a couple last questions, and it. Uh, I really want to thank all the people that have written comments or questions, or you know, just uh, participated in the comment section. I mean, that's a fun thing about doing live streams is you definitely have audience participation. Which, for instance, if we did some recording and just post it on YouTube, I mean, you don't get that interaction with other people that I definitely appreciate.
Yeah.
Um, I was just thinking, you actually did you hosted a Zoom call for the province of Australia, but as well as other people that were interested regarding a a walking tour through Rome. Now, just how did that come about, and what types of events do you or other people organize for the citizens in Australia specifically?
Um, so that came about because one of our citizens is based in Rome. She's studying, and that's Julia Aquila Agrippa or Grippa Aquila, and she's studying a thesis in Rome. And talking to her, I said to her, it'd be great if you could do a talk to our citizens and our allied legion, the 10th Praetensis. So we have a joint messenger group between Nova Roma here in Australia, the province of Australia, and ancient Roman reenactors. And so we had a chat about doing something, and she said, well, I could take you on a live tour. And we said, well, that'd be great. And then because she also has, she works weird hours because of the work that she does as well as study. And so trying to find a time that suited, like Europe and Australia, we ended up finding the time, and then we're able to head off, and Julia was able to take us through Rome, and we had a few little hiccups because it was live, and it was down to phone connectivity, but it was fantastic for us all the way from here. And there's people from our province that haven't been to Europe, haven't been to Rome, so it was fantastic for them. So that's how that one came about. Another time we did a Decimus Aurelius Sanguinarius found a Roman law group in Sydney. So there's a group of lawyers in Sydney, and they were getting together and reviewing ancient Roman law, and what did it mean, and how does it translate into modern law. And we contacted one of the leaders of that group and asked him whether he'd do a live presentation, and he said yes. And so we had, we did a session on that. He subsequently had a young family, or a baby, and so we haven't been able to get hold of him again to do another one, but he was willing to do a second one. So, and Nova Roma here in Australia really took off in 2000, back end of 2019. And then by March 2020, we're in lockdown here, and Melbourne went into a year's worth of lockdowns. So everything we did was pretty much online. So we try and, we try and get together with people online, and there was also a presentation on jewelry that was done as well. And we got people all over the place, and we got some people up in Sydney. Up in Sydney is 1,000 kilometres away. I mentioned to you offline that Ignarius is heading off to Adelaide. That's 920 kilometres away. So for us to keep in contact, in Europe, you're probably crossing multiple borders with those sorts of distances, whereas here you're just moving from one state to the next, similar to the US, I guess. So, although we don't have the population of the US, so engaging online is what we do, and then we're used to dealing with the world at different times and different spaces because of where we are. So we like to share where we can. So we just come up with crazy ideas of what to do next, and and off we go.
Speaking of sharing, you mentioned to me offline earlier that you have a few Roman objects in your possession. So I'm wondering if you have them handy nearby, and you could just describe them for us.
Yes. So I have some coins, just different bits and pieces that I've picked up along the way. I can't even tell you what they are, but they are, well, I've got some here of Septimius Severus, Septimius Severus. So they're just
So denarius. Oh, nice.
Yeah. So they're just little pieces that I've purchased along the way. Then I've got this is actually quite an interesting one. So this was a pendant from World War II. And when Mussolini was trying to reinstate, so that's Scipio Africanus and Hannibal. And when Mussolini was trying to make Italy great again, he had these pendants that he distributed to tie back to the times of Rome's greatness, and various other coins. But I have, so that's a the hell was that for? I can't remember what that was, but that's.
Maybe somebody in the chats will know. My
it's
guess
a medical
is
tool
either
of some sort. They're tweezers.
Oh, wow.
Supposedly.
Yeah, I've seen a couple tweezers just like that.
And a fibula.
Very nice.
Now, a nice piece that I was given to me as a gift is this piece. Can you see that?
Oh, definitely. Is that
So that's
bronze?
an arrowhead from the Teutoburg forest.
Oh, wow. That's actually very large. Because I have some arrowheads, or actually I have one arrowhead Roman from Eastern Europe, and it's definitely it's a bit smaller than that. So that's a pretty good sized portion.
And then I have just pieces of pottery. Like I said to you, I just love walking through, fields, and these I found in Crete, which nice lip to an amphora of some sort, carrying some wine or some oil that ended up on someone's plate. But so that's those. But I do have something non-Roman. If you wanted me to share that.
Sure.
So this is a 300-year-old katana.
Oh wow.
So it's a Japanese samurai sword.
Did you pick that up when you were in Japan or in Australia?
The story behind this sword is quite interesting. I'll share it with you. But it's actually a copy. It's actually a 300-year-old copy of a famous sword. So I mentioned earlier, I think I've mentioned to you maybe offline, I'm not sure if I said it earlier, but I was into Japanese history. And everybody at work knows that I'm into Japanese history. And so one day I arrive at my desk, and this is sitting on my desk. And so I go and talk to the person who dropped it on my desk, and I said, where did this come from? And they said, well, it had been found in a storeroom. Had Japanese expats that would be working here, and then they go back to Japan after 3 years. And this was found in a storeroom. And when we were moving offices, and so they said, we thought you might be interested in it. And that's the story of this samurai sword.
Nice. So on the tang, you said that there's some Japanese writing. I believe that's also the maker of the sword normally. Do you know if the sword maker was famous or not so famous?
That's why I'm saying it's a copy. It's a copy. So there is this style of sword which was manufactured in Japan by swordsmiths, but this is a copy of those. It's not an original of a famous swordsmith. So it's it's a copy of a famous swordsmith's style of sword, of katana.
I gotcha.
That's why I said it's a copy.
I do have to say, I'm so appreciative of you showing us that, even though it's not Rome, it's very fascinating. And I've been to Japan a few times, and I'm a big fan of the culture and the history as well. So that was amazing. I do see that, unfortunately, it's getting very late, so we're gonna have to wrap this up. And just one last question in the comments, and then we're done. Somebody wrote, what brought about your interest in Japanese history? You said that you work for a Japanese company, but I presume that you were interested in Japan before that.
Well, yes, my interest started when I was into martial arts, so that's where my interest started with Japan and visiting Japan with work. So I've been working for a Japanese companies all my working career. So that's 37 odd years. So ever since then, and ever since I've been able to get across there, I was fascinated in the Sengoku Jidai period, which is from about 1400 to about 1600 AD. So that's the period that I'm fascinating in. And again, same as what I do now, I've got a map of all the castles that I've been to, and they're out in the middle of nowhere. And you're walking through forests, and there's just stones on the ground that, unless you know what you're looking at, you miss them.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to stream with me, but also answering so many questions I have and showing us your objects. I found it fascinating, especially the objects behind you, is so well made, and your Aquilifier. What do you call it? Not your equipment, but you call it a display.
The headdress.
But when you wear it all, you call it your Aquilifier display, right?
Representation.
A representation. Yeah, absolutely amazing. at the beginning of the stream as an intro, I have that picture. So anybody who wants to just uh, goes to the beginning of the stream, and you could see a wonderful representation of that. I do have to say thank you for all the comments and questions in the chat. I really appreciate it. That's one of the reasons why I really like to do live streams, is that the audience could participate. And uh, on that note, personally, once again, thank you so much. I hope to see you online or on the Nova Roman Forum, doing other events and participating. So we haven't met before, so it was also nice to get to know another fellow Roman, Nova
Yes.
Roman.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to share my passion and my love outside of work and my family. So thank you very much, Decimus.
I thank you. I wish everybody a good night or good afternoon, or perhaps a good morning if you're streaming from North America, and a big valete.
Valete.